They greenlit the sequel without a story in mind. They just wanted to equal an unexpected gold mine. He said, oh no, as Heston said, I got to go. These are just some of the facts you ought to know as we go. Beneath the minute of the apes. Beneath the minute of the apes. Beneath the minute of the apes.
Hello and welcome to Minute of the Apes, the daily podcast where we break down every minute of the Planet of the Apes films 1 minute at a time. I'm Todd. It's Monday. I'm here with Richard and Sean and Zeus. Happy Monday, fellas.
Hey.
Hello, everybody.
Yay.
So here we are starting off the week. We're going to do what we always do. We're going to say thank you to the people who basically put us in this seat. That is the Star Wars Minute, guys. I listened the other day to Revenge of the Sith, and
they're getting near the end. As we record this, Obi-Wan had just cut off Vader's arms and legs.
Which, you know, they even said Mythbusters should jump in at that point and do a myth. But they did do a Mythbusters about, does the high ground help anything? But the idea of somehow swiping
his arms and legs at the same time is just the strangest maneuver.
So I posted a tweet out, you know, that's the moment of the film that should have been sent back with simply the sticker on the front that said, with passion. You know, because that's just a horrible part of the film. Anyway, we digress. Thank you so much. You guys are great. People go listen to them. So it's minute 21. Sean, tell us what's going on.
All right, we're starting minute 21 with the gorilla speaking of obtaining new and improved feeding grounds in the Forbidden Zone, and ends with Cornelius begging Zero to stand.
And as always, let's take a listen to that minute.
Feeding grounds, and these grounds we can obtain in the once forbidden zone. It is therefore our holy duty to put our feet upon it, to enter it, to put the marks of our guns and our wheels and our flags upon it. To expand the boundaries of our ineluctable power, and to invade, 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 invade!
Sir, it pleases your husband, I beg you to stand.
All right, as of minute 21, we've got 3 living humans, 4 dead humans, one dead ape, a shrewdness of apes, and a gaggle of humans. Well, so they're talking about conquering lands and putting boots and guns and wheels on it. So is this supposed to kind of be a little bit of manifest destiny of going sea to shining sea?
I don't know what this moment's supposed to be. I watched it, and I tried to watch again and lead into it, so I didn't have the fatigue of, you know, doing last week's and into this. There's so little segue into why the apes are suddenly upset. Now, in subsequent minutes, we may find out why he's pressing for this kind of thing. I don't know what's got him in a tizzy, and don't you usually at least kind of have to pepper in a story?
The rumblings of it at first somehow?
So, I have the script that I have here, and Ursus basically says everything that we heard in the previous minute. And
do we know that's his name yet?
No, we don't.
Oops. Scratch that.
Wait, there'll be you just bleep that out.
Whack!
Yeah.
Okay. So, unnamed guerrilla leader.
Yes.
Unnamed guerrilla leader is kind of gives this speech beforehand and afterwards. It kind of splits between these 2 minutes. And he talks about we must replenish the land that was ravaged by humans. Mm-hmm. Right?
Mm-hmm.
It then kind of culminates when he begins to shout, invade, invade. And you're like, what is happening at this moment? I'm starting to think that in the last movie where we talked about race in America at the time.
Right.
And this movie where we had the obvious forbidden zone from a nuclear detonation, that we're kind of moving past maybe the idea of the Cold War, and we're actually talking about the stuff that's happening in Vietnam.
Yeah, I definitely think that.
Yeah, I can see that.
And, you know, I want to be fair to the film and say that you don't have to explain away.
Yeah, you want to jump in the middle of it. You don't want to do a 5-minute crawl that sets up the entire society up to this point.
But at the same time, a good film will usually at least give the idea that a struggle is occurring so that when they speak, we correlate it together. And I for me, that's missing. I think his speech is great. He's a great actor. And because of that, we really didn't get this last time. I teased that he had a great career. That's James Gregory playing our guerrilla leader, who was in 66 episodes of Barney Miller as Inspector Frank Luger.
Okay.
Did numerous episodes of Gunsmoke and Bonanza, Twilight Zone, but my very favorite, and it's one of my favorite films of all time, he played Senator John Iceland in the original 1962 The Manchurian Candidate by John Frankenheimer.
All right.
He's a great actor, and he takes this moment that I'm complaining about and still somehow makes it very impassioned to the point that we're following him. Mm-hmm. Cool looking character, we're believing in it, but it just rings hollow because I don't, again, know
who he is and
why he's there, why he's feeling that way.
Exactly. He talks about we must replenish land that was ravaged by humans with new productive feeding grounds. We can obtain once in the Forbidden Zone. It is therefore our own duty, to enter it, put the mark upon our wheels and guns and flags upon it. The guerrillas then cheer and they say invade, invade, invade. It's 30 seconds into this moment, and the audience really can't see this. It's 30 seconds in the moment where we actually kind of get a first really solid glance at the fact that there's protesters in the background. Mm-hmm. And it appears to be some type of cart, possibly with something in it. I counted about 10 what appears to be chimps with signs.
All right. And
about 3 guerrilla soldiers on horseback that seem to be kind of watching this little protest. Okay. Now, when we talked about this script, the shooting script that I have, outside of some switch in terms of the storytelling with Taylor and Brent being introduced, and then the rest of Taylor's results being panned out, they do actually mention what's happening here in the script a couple of pages earlier, right before unnamed general leader actually starts talking. Do you want me to tell you what's going on?
Please do.
Yeah.
Okay, so. As they're beginning to start this actual conversation, it says guerrilla soldiers brutally herding half-naked humans into wagon cages. And we see one of the wagon cages, and I actually thought I could see somebody inside that cage, but it's not very apparent because it's not ever shown just behind General Leader's soldier. It says, at the arena's main site, pathetically small demonstration of chimpanzees with banners that say, "Free the humans, unite in peace." And I particularly think when we get into later minutes, it's going to make a little more sense.
Yeah, okay. And I think that if this were a speech that happened in the very first minutes of this film, it would be fine because it creates questions. Why is he this way? And then we're going to see explanations. But when you're occurring 20 minutes into a film, and this is the first time you've opposed that, we know this is Planet of the Apes. It's the second time here. We know what Brent is going to see. We're not surprised by it. We need to have the questions posed of what is created, not just what Taylor, Nova, and Brent and Skipper have gone through, but the apes.
Yeah.
We're expecting to see the apes this time, and we get them much earlier in this film than we did the last one.
I just wonder if the audience at this particular moment of this particular era understands what's happening more than we do in the context of watching it 30 years later, 40 years later.
Could be.
Because there's this sense of we have small protesters outside. We have the 3 apparent classes happening inside the arena itself. We have the elite by the Dr. Zaius and the orangutans. We have the military, right, who's obviously giving a speech right now, and then we have the chimps that typically have been representing science on some level, right? So if we were to take this and put this in a university context, the chimps are the universities. They are the teachers. They are the faculty. They are the thinkers. The
intellectuals, yeah.
The intellectuals. So I maybe they didn't feel they needed to point out what was happening outside because they thought people would follow it based upon what's happening at that moment in time.
I agree, but usually what you're going to do is you're going to, instead of just because you have to point, and I did notice those protesters in the background, but you have to point that out. There's never a moment that establishes. Usually you have an establishing shot, which is you hear
the protesters, and then you hear him talking over them.
Yeah, you may see them in the front, and you hear his speech while you're seeing the protest, so you know that there's opposition going. But these films, again, they're shot in such a way that they don't often do that undercut element of film.
You think about the fact that if they actually had filmed a scene or shown a scene of humans being herded into wagons, you would understand part of why Brent was in shock and horror when he kind of first looks at the city. And you might understand a little bit more about what General Leader is talking about, maybe, and why the chimps are protesting. We have no sense of why, up to this point, other than he's talking about the Forbidden Zone and some type of military invasion to the Forbidden Zone, and replenish the lands that are ravaged by humans. And I have no idea if he's talking about the humans that he knows or if he knows he's talking about Scripture.
Well, we talk so much about, you bring up a point about Brent and the things and the shock that he sees. This script so far relies on him commenting, and I can't remember what comments he's made to this point, but he comments on what he sees.
Mm-hmm.
If you give the audience the shots and let them see it, he doesn't have to comment to describe, to tell us that he's in hell. And that's kind of, to me, where, James Franciscus, we've already discussed, took the script, had it rewritten so that Brent wasn't just a cardboard character.
Right.
There should have been more of that type of filmmaking. And it doesn't, you've already got those processors set up.
Yeah.
It's sunlit. You simply put a camera there and get a shot of it going in. There are opportunities that this film, and it's not considered to be one of the better of this whole saga.
Right.
There were opportunities they had to tell the story visually so we didn't have to be so remedial in the, oh my God, it's a planet of apes.
A city of apes.
City of apes,
Yeah.
my bad, City of apes.
But I mean, his entire speech about the Forbidden Zone being closed, and rightly so, and
Yeah, I see what you're saying. Is he
Barren area
quoting
now
scripture,
inhabited.
or is
We
he
must
perverting
replenish-
scripture?
And I'm sorry, I got away from your scripture thing.
we must replenish the land that was ravaged by the humans. And I'm like, that was part of the minute before, and I'm like, which humans? We're talking about.
Are you talking about
Xeras?
humans in general?
We're
or are
talking
you
about
talking
Xeras
about
people, with we need new productive feeding grounds. Okay, so we start off with this with saying with new productive feeding grounds. Feeding grounds? Like what is happening for them that they don't have feeding grounds?
Was it the escalation from Taylor's exposure there that has somehow gotten him in a tizzy, and he's now saying that about them eating the crops and whatnot? Is that simply what it is?
Is that the tipping point?
that you mentioned,
That's what I would assume.
you mentioned something interesting. We must replenish the land that was ravaged by humans with new productive feeding grounds. And again, looking at this that we can attain once in the once forbidden zone. So we saw their map, right? We saw that little teeny tiny map.
Yeah.
And we saw basically where they lived, and we'd speculated whether there was more outside of that, based upon the prior movie. And I'm getting the sense from this particular paragraph that they do live in a very closed society that hasn't
Do they have a border wall?
conquered, hasn't moved past
Right.
beyond their own
Their
little
little
city, their
territory.
walls. Just again based upon these minutes,
Right.
and that the desire to go into the Forbidden Zone to reclaim lands, to invade. It's just
It brings up an interesting idea when you start thinking about that oftentimes the idea to invade is a very bold one, but a very ill-thought out one, because he's saying invade, invade, invade. He doesn't know what's out there either.
Right.
So no matter whether it's Taylor's done this, it's scripture, whatever the humans are, I wonder, going back to your point about Vietnam, is that what it was? Is they are simply trying to evoke the idea that we're invading an unseen territory.
Correct.
And trying to create the fear, not only in the people here he's trying to control, but the fear in the audience to make them understand why this is all
why
happening.
this is a military action versus
Right.
an action kind of driven by the government, right? Or an action driven by the people. This appears to be something driven by the military. And whether that's paralleling something that was happening in the U.S. specifically, or whether we're talking about another military regime in a different country, that I don't know.
It's just very interesting that we went from the end of the last film, and so quickly, it seems relatively quick, that the orangutans are no longer apparently the dominant species
It
there.
seemed like,
doesn't
but it
look
seemed
like
like
it,
the
does it?
orangutans were in charge and the gorillas were military / police / grunt work,
Right.
and then the chimps were
Just in this very, very short
Scientists,
span of
yeah.
time, something's flipped, and now the military is in control.
Well, it
It's-
looks like every time
appears.
they cut back to the crowd, either they shot it well or they actually did it. It looks like they add more and more gorillas every time you cut back to the crowd, as if the crowd is actually growing.
Getting bigger and
Yeah.
bigger and bigger. That may have been choices of the shots, too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I couldn't help but wonder, as you show us that thing of the protesters and the shot far off, I can only imagine this lovely assistant director, that's actually where the good makeup went, was, I want all my good makeup out there with the protesters.
Yeah.
We're not going to really see you, but man, I want you to be
We're
there.
going to cover you up with a walkway. We don't see most of you, but get them out there.
And you pull over masks, just come right here. It's right
Right
here.
up front.
I mean, we had talked about the last couple of minutes where we saw kind of like we were trying to figure out if they were duplicating the shot to make it look like there were more people, that we were
Right.
seeing one half of the stadium and then the other half of or one half of the arena, the other half of the arena. And then we get kind of this back shot around 36 seconds in where you can see unnamed guerrilla leader, but
Yeah.
you do get a